It was a Tuesday, I remember that much. Just a regular, humdrum Tuesday morning. The kind where the sun hits the kitchen just right, making my coffee steam look even more inviting. My little corner of the world, here in Cypress Creek Estates, felt pretty darn peaceful. I'd bought into this HOA community a few years back, mostly for the quiet streets, the well-maintained landscaping, and the promise of a certain level of order, and for the most part, it delivered. I was scrolling through my phone, half listening to the local news anchor droning on about traffic, and half planning my grocery list for the evening. You know, just living the dream. As I polished off my toast, I remembered I hadn't checked my personal email yet, the one I use for all the community stuff. Usually it's just notices about trash collection, or a reminder that the pool closes at dusk, or the occasional email blast about some potluck nobody ever attends. Mundane stuff. I clicked open my inbox, scrolled past a few coupons, and then there it was, an email from the HOA. Subject line, Important New Community Wellness Initiative, Mandatory Participation. My eyebrows did a little dance. Mandatory? I muttered to myself, already sensing the faint whiff of something extra. Our HOA does love to get involved, bless its heart. They've tried book clubs, bird-watching groups, even a learn-to-crochet workshop last fall. All well-meaning, all mostly ignored. I clicked it open, still with that calm morning coffee glow. The body of the email was all chipper, bright language. Exciting news, residents, it began. To foster a stronger sense of community and promote holistic well-being, the Cypress Creek Estates HOA is thrilled to announce our new mandatory weekly yoga classes. I blinked. Yoga? Mandatory yoga? My first thought was a chuckle. Mandatory? Really? I pictured myself, a guy whose idea of stretching is reaching for the remote, attempting a downward dog. The visual alone was enough to make me smile. The email went on about the benefits, the certified instructor, apparently, someone named Brenda, who was passionate about community engagement. There were even pictures of people in various pretzel-like poses, looking serene. Yeah, serene. It detailed the schedule, every Wednesday evening, 6 p.m., at the community clubhouse. All residents are expected to attend to ensure maximum community cohesion and personal growth, it stated, bolded for emphasis. My smile faded a little. It wasn't just a suggestion then. They were actually going for mandatory? I reread it just to make sure my eyes weren't playing tricks on me. Nope, mandatory. I just kind of shook my head, poured myself another cup of coffee, and set my phone down. I mean, it was yoga. It wasn't like they were asking me to build a new community center with my bare hands. I figured it was just another one of those HOA flights of fancy, something they'd try to enforce for a week or two, realize nobody actually cared, and then it would quietly fade away, like the aforementioned crochet class. No big deal, right? I had no intention of going, of course. My Wednesday evenings were reserved for sports, or just, not doing mandatory yoga. I'd just ignore it, like all the other exciting initiatives. This was just a normal Tuesday after all. What could possibly go wrong? So, picture this. It's a perfectly ordinary Saturday afternoon. I'm finally off work, got my feet up, probably got some classic rock playing low in the background, enjoying a cold one. Just unwinding, The sun's shining, a slight breeze through the window, pure bliss. Our HOA, for the most part, is pretty chill. We pay our dues, they cut the grass, fix the occasional sprinkler head, standard suburban stuff. But then there's Karen. Every HOA has one, right? Ours is named Brenda, but she's a Karen through and through. Brenda, with her perfectly coiffed blonde bob and an insatiable need to control everyone and everything. She'd been elected to the HOA board a few months back, and ever since, it felt like our quiet little community had been invaded by a zealous activity director from a budget cruise ship. Her latest brainchild? Mandatory community wellness initiatives. And by mandatory, she meant her personal agenda, pushed with all the force of a Category 5 hurricane. Top of her list, twice weekly outdoor yoga classes, held right there on the common green. Now, I'm all for people finding their zen, but I'm a man who considers lifting a remote control a strenuous workout. Yoga? Not exactly my speed. Plus, the idea of being forced to contort myself into a downward dog while Brenda barked instructions felt less like wellness and more like a punishment. I'd successfully dodged them for weeks. I'd seen the flyers, the passive-aggressive emails about community participation, but I figured, hey, it's a free country, and my house, my rules. I wasn't bothering anyone. I'd just, not gone. Simple as that. I thought I was being a good neighbor by simply existing and minding my own business. Apparently, that's not good enough for Brenda. I was mid-sip of my soda, half dozing on the couch, when the doorbell rang. Not just a polite ding-dong, but a series of insistent rapid-fire jabs, like someone was trying to break the button. My peaceful afternoon instantly shattered. I sighed, rubbing my eyes. Who in the world? I grumbled to myself, dragging myself off the couch. I peeked through the peephole, and sure enough, there she was, Brenda, standing on my porch, hands on her hips, a look on her face that could curdle milk. She was practically vibrating with self-importance. I opened the door, managing a tight smile. "Brenda, everything all right?" I asked, genuinely confused. She usually stuck to mass emails and occasionally cornering people at the mailbox. This was new and aggressive. She didn't return the smile. Her eyes narrowed and she practically spat the words out. "Everything is not all right, Mark. In fact, it's quite disappointing." Okay, here we go. My internal alarm bells started clanging. I braced myself. Disappointing? What are you talking about? I tried to keep my tone even, though a familiar wave of annoyance was already starting to lap at the shores of my patience. "The community yoga classes, Mark," she declared, her voice rising, as if I'd committed a cardinal sin. "They are scheduled for Tuesday and Thursday mornings at 8 o'clock and Sunday evenings at 6. And yet I have not seen you at a single session, not one." She emphasized one as if it were a personal affront. I blanked. Yoga classes? That's what this was about? Seriously? My confusion was warring with a rapidly growing irritation. "Brenda, I'm aware of the classes," I said slowly, trying to sound reasonable. "But they're optional. I'm not really into yoga, so I haven't attended." Her jaw dropped. Literally, her perfectly made-up face contorted into an expression of pure outrage. "Optional?" she shrieked, her voice now piercing the quiet afternoon. "Mark, these are mandatory community wellness initiatives. As a resident of this development, you are expected to participate in maintaining the health and vitality of our shared living space." I stared at her. My annoyance began to morph into disbelief. Mandatory? Brenda, with all due respect, where does it say in the HOA bylaws that I have to attend your yoga classes? Because I've read them, and I don't recall anything about forced stretching. I even managed a slight ironic chuckle, thinking she'd back down, realize how absurd this was. Big mistake. She actually took a step closer, poking a finger into the air in front of my chest. "It's implied, Mark. It's about community. It's about engagement. And your blatant disregard for these activities shows a complete lack of respect for the board and for me personally, as the chair of the wellness committee." Her voice was getting louder, attracting the attention of a neighbor walking their dog down the street. Great, just great. "Brenda," I said, my voice now much firmer, my patience officially worn thin. "I am an adult. I pay my dues, I follow the rules, and what I do with my free time, or whether I choose to participate in optional community events, is entirely my business. I am not coming to your yoga classes." Her face went from red to a terrifying shade of purple. Her eyes bulged. "Oh, you are not, are you?" she hissed, practically vibrating with rage. "Well, we'll see about that. I'm going to make sure the HOA imposes a fine, and if that doesn't work, I'll call the authorities. This is a matter of community safety and well-being." My mouth fell open. "You're going to call the cops because I won't do yoga?" I couldn't help but laugh, a short, incredulous bark. "Brenda, you really think the police are going to respond to a yoga refusal call?" The sheer absurdity of it was mind-boggling. She didn't laugh, she just glared at me, her eyes glinting with a dangerous resolve. "We'll see, Mark. We will absolutely see." And with that, she spun on her heel, her perfect blonde bob swishing with indignation, and practically stomped off my porch, marching with purpose down the sidewalk towards, presumably, her phone and a completely bewildered 911 dispatcher. I stood there, my hand still on the doorknob, watching her retreat. My earlier peaceful bliss was utterly annihilated, replaced by a swirling mix of shock, exasperation, and a simmering low-grade fury. Call the cops? Over yoga? This woman had officially lost her mind. And I knew, right then and there, that this was just the beginning. So after I made it crystal clear that I wouldn't be attending her mandatory downward dog and decrease sessions, you'd think Karen would just, back off. Live and let live. Realize that not everyone wants to contort themselves into a pretzel while listening to her pseudo-spiritual ramblings about communal energy and positive vibrations that somehow only applied when she was in charge. But no, of course not. That's not how a Karen operates, is it? It's like they're genetically predisposed to double down on every single illogical, self-serving demand, convinced they're some kind of neighborhood deity. The first real sign that she wasn't letting this go, that my polite refusal had only fueled her fire, was a brightly colored flyer taped to my door. Seriously, a flyer, not even an email from the HOA, a formal notice, just some cheap printout with clip art of a lotus flower that looked like it belonged on a discount spa brochure, and bold, angry red letters screaming, "Absence from wellness program will result in HOA review." Like I was a kindergarten kid skipping nap time? I just stared at it, the flimsy paper curling slightly at the edges from the hallway air, and felt this slow, insidious burn start in my gut. HOA review? For not wanting to do yoga with a woman who clearly thought she was the guru of the complex? My blood pressure was already climbing just thinking about the sheer audacity. The shadows from the recessed lights in the hallway seemed to cling to the garish print, making it feel even more ominous than it actually was. I crumpled it up, tossed it in the recycling bin with a satisfying thud, and tried to ignore it. Maybe she'd take the hint, accept the universal truth that not everyone subscribes to her particular brand of forced camaraderie. I even started taking the stairs more often, just to avoid running into her in the elevator. Cowardly, maybe, but I was busy, and frankly, I didn't have the emotional bandwidth for her particular brand of entitled nonsense that week. I just wanted to live my life, pay my dues, and not be forced into pretzel poses. But fate, or rather Karen, had other plans. I was heading out one morning, just trying to grab a coffee before work, minding my own business, thinking about deadlines, and there she was, waiting, by the mailboxes. Leaning against them actually, arms crossed, looking like she was guarding a treasure chest full of complaints. Her tightly permed hair, usually impeccable, seemed to have an extra layer of shellac that morning, reflecting the harsh fluorescent light of the lobby like a helmet. Her eyes, magnified behind those ridiculously oversized cat-eye glasses, narrowed to slits the instant she saw me. The hallway lights, usually so mundane, suddenly seemed to cast longer, more dramatic shadows, making her angular features appear even more severe, almost predatory. It was like a bad movie scene, honestly, the air practically crackling with unspoken confrontation. "Mr. Peterson," she started, her voice dripping with that sickly sweet condescension that always grated on my last nerve. It was the kind of tone that made you instantly suspicious, like a rotten apple coated in sugar. "I noticed you haven't been joining our sessions, and you haven't responded to my communications." She emphasized communications, as if her tacky flyer was a formal subpoena. I stopped dead in my tracks, my hand still on the doorknob to the main entrance. "Miss Henderson," I replied,
trying to keep my voice even, though I could already feel the tension coiling in my chest, a familiar dread bubbling up. I made it clear I'm not interested in the yoga classes. They're optional, and frankly, an invasion of privacy to even suggest they're mandatory. I took a deep breath, trying to channel patience I didn't entirely possess. She pushed herself off the mailboxes, taking a deliberate step closer, her perfectly manicured finger pointing vaguely in my direction. That fake smile tightened into a thin, venomous line, revealing a sliver of her upper gum. They are part of our new community wellness initiative, Mr. Peterson, designed to foster a more cohesive and active living environment. It's for everyone's benefit, you understand. And as an HOA board member, she puffed out her chest slightly, as if that gave her divine authority, I have a responsibility to ensure compliance with our new directives. Compliance? I scoffed, a genuine laugh bubbling up, laced with pure disbelief. My initial annoyance was rapidly morphing into outright frustration. Are you serious? You think you can mandate my participation in a yoga class? What's next? Mandatory knitting circles? Forced interpretive dance? This isn't a commune, Miss Henderson. It's an apartment building, a place where people pay good money to live without being micromanaged by their neighbors. Her face, which moments ago was attempting to project an air of concerned authority, went from saccharine to sour in an instant. The shadows from the recessed lighting seemed to deepen the lines around her mouth, making her look even more severe, almost gaunt in the artificial light. Her eyes, behind those glasses, bore into me. Your flippancy is noted, Mr. Peterson. However, the rules are the rules, and your continued defiance is creating a negative precedent for other residents. We simply cannot have individuals undermining the collective spirit of our community. Her voice had dropped in pitch, a dangerous edge creeping in.
My defiance is me exercising my right to not be told what to do with my free time, I shot back, my patience not just wearing thin, but completely shredded. I wasn't shouting, but my voice had definitely lost its polite veneer. The frustration was now a tangible heat spreading through my face. There's nothing in the HOA bylaws about mandatory wellness programs. Show me the clause. I'll wait. I've read them cover to cover. She bristled, her chin jutting out defiantly. Her hands, which had been crossed, now gestured wildly. It's an unwritten understanding, a matter of common decency and respect for your neighbors. It's about participation. Common decency? I repeated, my voice now dripping with incredulity, mirroring her earlier condescension. Demanding I do yoga or face HOA review is your idea of common decency? Harassing me in the lobby for choosing how I spend my evenings? I threw my hands up in exasperation, ignoring the sharp pain in my shoulders from holding them so tensely. Look, Miss Henderson, I'm a grown man. I don't need you to dictate my fitness routine, and I certainly don't appreciate being harassed about it. Harassment? She gasped, clutching her chest dramatically, as if I had just accused her of a heinous crime. Her eyes widened, a performance for the ages. I am simply upholding the standards of this community. If you refuse to cooperate, Mr. Peterson, then I will have no choice but to escalate this further. Her voice dropped again into a conspiratorial whisper, but it carried the weight of a sledgehammer. I will be forced to involve the authorities. My jaw dropped. The authorities? For yoga? I stared at her, genuinely trying to process if she was actually serious. The absurdity of it was almost comical, bordering on the surreal, but the anger was quickly overtaking any amusement. This woman was genuinely unhinged, completely, utterly, tragically delusional. Involve the authorities? I repeated slowly, a dark, disbelieving chuckle escaping my lips. The phrase felt alien, ridiculous. For not doing yoga? Miss Henderson, with all due respect, and that's dwindling by the second, you've completely lost your mind. What are you going to do? Call the yoga police? Get me arrested for resisting downward dog?
Are they going to SWAT team my apartment for a sun salutation gone wrong? I knew I was pushing it, baiting her, pouring fuel on the fire. But at this point, I just couldn't help myself. The sheer audacity, the unparalleled arrogance of her threat was breathtaking. Her face turned a shade of puce I didn't know existed outside of a cartoon. Her lips, thin already, practically disappeared. You think this is a joke, Mr. Peterson? We'll see who's laughing when the proper channels are involved.
I will report you for insubordination, for disrupting community harmony, and for creating a hostile environment. She spun on her heel, a whirlwind of righteous indignation, her shellacked hair barely wobbling, and marched off towards her apartment, her sensible shoes clicking a staccato, ominous beat down the hall. I just stood there, leaning against my door, shaking my head, a hollow laugh escaping me. Unbelievable, I muttered to myself, the words tasting like ash. Absolutely unbelievable. I figured that would be the end of it. A petty threat, an empty gesture from a frustrated, power-tripping busybody. I was wrong. Oh, so wrong. The air in the lobby seemed to thicken, a palpable tension hanging in the aftermath of her dramatic exit. I felt watched, even though no one else was around. Later that afternoon, just as the workday was winding down, I was in the middle of a conference call, headphones on, totally engrossed in work, totally oblivious to the real world, when there was this insistent, jarring knocking on my door. Not a neighborly tap, but a firm, official-sounding rap, rap, rap that echoed through my apartment. I pulled my headphones off, a frown creasing my brow. Who on earth? My heart picked up a beat, a premonition of something utterly bizarre. I opened the door, and there they were. 2 uniformed police officers standing in my hallway, looking like they were investigating something serious. The harsh overhead lights of the hallway glinted off their badges, off the utility belts, off the serious expressions on their faces. A wave of pure, unadulterated disbelief washed over me, so strong it almost buckled my knees. It was quickly followed by a boiling fury, a hot, uncontrollable rage that started deep in my gut and surged through my entire body. One of them, a taller officer with a weary expression that suggested he'd seen it all, though I doubted he'd seen this, stepped forward. "Mr. Peterson, we received a complaint about a disturbance regarding a community wellness program." He said it so matter-of-factly, so calmly, like a routine call, like a barking dog or a loud party. I just stared, speechless for a moment, my brain struggling to connect the words he was saying to the reality I was living. My mind raced, flashing back to Karen's smug face, her absurd threat. She actually did it! She actually called the cops! For yoga! The sheer audacity, the unparalleled, mind-numbing Karen-ness of it all was almost too much to comprehend. I could feel the blood rushing to my ears, the heat rising in my face, a vein throbbing in my temple. This was beyond ridiculous. This was an insult, a personal affront, and it was about to get loud. So there I was, just trying to enjoy my Saturday afternoon, catching up on some yard work, when I saw it. 2 patrol cars, lights off, slowly rolling down our cul-de-sac. My heart did a little thump-thump, because you just know that means trouble in a quiet neighborhood like ours, and usually it's Karen-related. I swear, the woman had a 6th sense for drama. As they got closer, I saw her, standing ramrod straight on her meticulously manicured lawn, arms crossed, practically vibrating with self-importance. She was pointing directly at my house, specifically at me. A cold dread washed over me, but it was quickly replaced by a wave of pure, unadulterated annoyance. What in the actual hell had I done now? My grass was cut, my trash cans were in, no rogue gnome sightings? The officers, 2 relatively young guys, pulled up and got out, their expressions a mix of professional neutrality and what I could only describe as mild bewilderment.
They approached Karen first, and I could hear her voice, already pitched to a frequency that could shatter glass, before she even opened her mouth properly. "Officers, thank you so much for responding. It's critical!" she shrieked, practically bowing. "This man, Mr. Henderson, is a danger to our community's cohesion and well-being. He is actively defying HOA mandates." One of the officers, a tall, calm-looking guy with a neatly trimmed beard, held up a hand. "Ma'am, please, slow down. Can you explain the situation calmly?" Karen took a dramatic, shuddering breath, then unleashed the full force of her indignation. "He is refusing to attend the mandatory community wellness yoga classes, despite repeated warnings, despite the fact that his non-participation is causing a ripple effect of disharmony. We all agreed it's in the spirit of our community bylaws." I just stood there, leaning on my rake, utterly dumbfounded. My jaw actually might have dropped. They called the cops on me for yoga? I swear, I had to physically restrain myself from bursting out laughing right there. This was peak Karen. The other officer, shorter and looking increasingly uncomfortable, glanced over at me, then back at Karen. "Ma'am, with all due respect, is he actually breaking a law? Not attending a voluntary—" "It is not voluntary!" Karen yelled, cutting him off. Her face was turning a rather alarming shade of puce. "It was voted upon by the Wellness Committee. I am the head of the Wellness Committee. Therefore, it is mandatory. He is setting a precedent of insubordination. What if everyone decides they don't want to stretch and find their inner peace? The entire fabric of our neighborhood will unravel." I just stood there, leaning on my rake, utterly dumbfounded. My jaw actually might have dropped. They called the cops on me for yoga? I swear, I had to physically restrain myself from bursting out laughing right there. This was peak Karen. The other officer, shorter and looking increasingly uncomfortable, glanced over at me, then back at Karen. "Ma'am, with all due respect, is he actually breaking a law? Not attending a voluntary—" "It is not voluntary!" Karen yelled, cutting him off. Her face was turning a rather alarming shade of puce. "It was voted upon by the Wellness Committee. I am the head of the Wellness Committee. Therefore, it is mandatory. He is setting a precedent of insubordination. What if everyone decides they don't want to stretch and find their inner peace? The entire fabric of our neighborhood will unravel." She swept her arm dramatically towards the perfectly normal, well-kept houses around us, as if they were on the verge of collapsing into a sinkhole of unzenness. I decided it was my cue. I walked over, trying to keep my voice even despite the internal scream building in my head. "Officers, my name's Mark Henderson. I believe I'm the subject of this complaint." I gave them a weary smile. To clarify, the HOA bylaws state nothing about mandatory physical activities. There's a section on common area usage, sure, and noise ordinances, but nothing that dictates my personal fitness routine. The Wellness Committee is an advisory group, not a legislative body. And frankly, I'm pretty sure my inability to do a perfect downward dog isn't a criminal offense. The tall officer managed to suppress a small chuckle, though I saw the corner of his mouth twitch. He turned back to Karen, his expression now firm. "Ma'am, Mr. Henderson is correct. We cannot compel someone to attend a private, voluntary class, even if it's organized by an HOA committee. There's no criminal offense here, no disturbance of the peace, no actual threat to public safety." Karen's eyes, already wide, somehow managed to widen further. Her mouth opened and closed a few times like a fish out of water. She was clearly not used to having her authority questioned, especially not by actual law enforcement. This was her moment, her public stage, and it was crumbling before her very Lululemon-clad eyes. But he's defying! He's disrespecting the community! You don't understand the gravity of this situation. What kind of example does this set for the children? What if they decide they don't want to align their chakras either? Her voice was getting louder, shriller, echoing through the quiet afternoon air. I noticed a few curtains twitching in nearby houses. This was going to be the gossip for weeks. "Ma'am," the shorter officer said, stepping forward, his tone now less patient. "We are here to enforce laws, not HOA recommendations for stretching. If you have an issue with his adherence to HOA rules, that's a civil matter for the HOA board, not a police matter. And frankly, this is wasting our time when there are actual emergencies we need to attend to." That was it. The public meltdown. Karen's face went from puce to bright red. She pointed a trembling, accusatory finger right at me. "This is your fault! You've manipulated them! You're a menace, a cancer on this community! I will see you expelled, you hear me? Expelled! You will regret not finding your warrior pose." Her voice broke on the last few words, morphing into a strangled, indignant wail. She stomped her foot, a high-pitched, "huh," escaping her lips. And then she turned on her heel and marched back to her front door, muttering furiously under her breath about uncooperative individuals and the spiritual decline of modern society. The officers exchanged a look, then the tall one turned back to me, shaking his head slightly. "Mr. Henderson, we apologize for the disturbance. There's nothing we can do here. You're free to not do yoga." He had to bite back a smile at the end. I just nodded, a wave of relief washing over me, quickly followed by a triumphant grin. "Understood, officers. Thanks for your time." As they got back in their patrol cars, I could hear one of them say, "Did that just happen?" and the other one chuckle. I went back to my rake, feeling a lightness in my step I hadn't felt in weeks. Karen had tried, Karen had failed, and Karen had provided the entire neighborhood with an afternoon of unparalleled entertainment. And me? I was still not doing yoga, and it felt glorious. So there I was, standing in my own driveway with two of Temecula's finest looking at me, then at Karen, then back at me, probably wondering if they'd stumbled onto some sort of weird performance art piece. Karen, of course, was in full performance mode. "He's refusing to comply with HOA mandates," she shrieked, pointing a finger at me that vibrated with indignation. "He's disrupting the community's wellness. He needs to be disciplined." Officer Miller, bless his soul, a man who clearly looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, just sighed. He glanced at Officer Rodriguez, who was already struggling to hide a smirk. "Ma'am," Officer Miller said, his voice flat, "can you clarify what mandate you're referring to?" "The mandatory community yoga classes," Karen declared as if it were obvious. "I organize them. They are vital for our spiritual and physical well-being. He refuses to attend." I finally stepped in, trying to keep my voice calm, even though my insides were a knot of disbelief and pure, unadulterated annoyance. "Officers, with all due respect, there is no such thing as a mandatory yoga class in our HOA bylaws. I've checked multiple times. She's been harassing me for weeks, leaving flyers on my door, yelling at me in the street, and now this. All because I said no to Downward Dog on Tuesdays." Officer Rodriguez, who had clearly done his fair share of these calls, leaned forward. "Ma'am," he said, addressing Karen with a tone that bordered on paternalistic, "are you claiming this gentleman is breaking a law by not attending a voluntary community activity?" Karen sputtered, But it's for the good of the community. He's being uncooperative." "And who exactly made these classes mandatory?" Officer Miller pressed, pulling out a small notebook. "Is there a specific clause in the HOA agreement that states this?" Karen started to get flustered. "Well, I decided as the head of the Welcoming and Wellness Committee." My jaw almost hit the pavement. The head of the Welcoming and Wellness Committee was a title she'd given herself when she started this whole charade. There was no such official position. I held up my phone, which had the HOA bylaws pulled up. "Officers, here's the official document. No mention of mandatory yoga, wellness committees, or any requirement to participate in neighbor-led activities, artistic or otherwise." Officer Miller took my phone, scrolled for a moment, then handed it back. He looked at Karen, his expression now completely devoid of patience. Ma'am, it seems you've misinterpreted your role and frankly wasted our time. You cannot force a resident to attend a private class, and you certainly cannot call law enforcement because someone refuses to participate in a voluntary activity. This borders on harassment.
Karen's face went from indignant red to a blotchy purple. Harassment? I'm being harassed by his negativity? Officer Rodriguez stepped closer to her, his voice firm. Ma'am, if you continue to harass Mr. Peterson over this or misuse emergency services again, we'll have to consider further action. Do you understand? She stood there, speechless for once, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The sheer look of defeat on her face was almost cathartic. They then turned to me. Mr. Peterson, Officer Miller said, a slight shake of his head. We apologize for the inconvenience. Our recommendation is you take this up with the HOA board. They need to address this situation before it escalates further. I thanked them, watching as they gave Karen one last stern look before getting back in their patrol car. As they drove away, Karen just stood there, glaring at me. It was glorious. The silence was deafening, broken only by the chirping of crickets. I gave her a small, polite wave, then turned and went inside. It felt like walking through sunshine after a storm. But I knew this wasn't truly over. The next HOA board meeting was 2 weeks later, and I made sure to be there. I documented every flyer, every yelling incident, the police call, everything. I even had a printout of the bylaws highlighted. Karen, predictably, showed up, flanked by 2 of her most ardent yoga disciples. She looked like a general preparing for war. When it was my turn to speak, I laid it all out, calmly, factually, presenting the evidence of harassment and her misrepresentation of HOA rules. I even mentioned the police visit, which visibly made a few board members squirm. Then it was Karen's turn. She launched into a passionate, dramatic monologue about community spirit, the importance of holistic health, and how I was the one creating discord by refusing to join in. She even tried to pull the "I was just trying to help" card. But the board wasn't having it. Mr. Henderson, the HOA president, a man usually as expressive as a cardboard box, finally spoke. Karen, we've reviewed the bylaws. There is no provision for mandatory wellness classes. Furthermore, we've received multiple complaints, not just from Mr. Peterson, regarding your aggressive approach. Calling the police on a resident for not attending a voluntary activity is completely unacceptable and a severe breach of community conduct. He then dropped the hammer. Effective immediately, the Welcoming and Wellness Committee is dissolved. All official communication about community activities must come through the HOA office.
Any further instances of harassment or attempts to force residents into activities will result in disciplinary action, up to and including fines and potential removal from any official HOA-appointed positions, should you ever hold one again. Karen's face crumpled. It was truly magnificent. She looked utterly humiliated, utterly defeated. Her 2 yoga disciples suddenly found the ceiling very interesting. The relief that washed over me was immense. It wasn't just about the yoga, it was about standing my ground against someone who thought their personal whims trumped everyone else's rights. Later that week, I saw Karen in the grocery store. She saw me, her eyes narrowed, and she pointedly turned her cart down another aisle. Pure bliss. The quiet in my corner of the neighborhood since has been golden. No more flyers, no more impromptu yoga demos on my lawn. Just peace. Sometimes you just gotta let the Karens dig their own holes and then watch them fall right in. And man, did she fall deep.
So, the cops finally left. And honestly, it was less like a dramatic movie exit and more like 2 very tired, very professional men just shaking their heads, mumbling something about some people, and then peacing out. I stood there on my porch, just watching their cruiser pull away, and for a good minute, I didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or just go take a really, really long nap. The absurdity of it all just hit me in waves. Cops called on me for yoga, mandatory yoga. I mean, you can't make this stuff up, right?
Karen, of course, was still fuming. She had stomped back into her house without so much as a glance my way after the officers politely informed her that no, refusing to attend a voluntary community activity was not, in fact, a criminal offense. They even clarified that an HOA has zero authority to mandate physical attendance at such events, let alone involve law enforcement. It was beautiful, really. The way her face just deflated. All that self-important puffery just shriveled up right there on my doorstep. It was a sight to behold, I tell ya. But even with the satisfaction, there was this deep sigh that just wanted to escape my soul. The sheer energy expended just to deal with such monumental self-imposed nonsense was draining. Afterward, things got quiet. Too quiet, almost. For about a week, Karen was a ghost. No emails, no passive-aggressive notes in the mailbox, no glaring from across the street. It was glorious. I almost started thinking that maybe, just maybe, she'd learned something. Maybe the brush with actual law enforcement, even though she was the one who called them, had finally clicked something in her brain about overstepping boundaries. Then came the HOA meeting. Oh boy, this was the real aftermath. Word travels fast in our little community, especially when police cruisers are involved. The whole mandatory yoga thing had already been a hot topic, mostly because people were confused, annoyed, or just thought it was hilarious. But when it became clear that Karen had actually tried to weaponize the police over it, that's when the community really got involved. The meeting started with her trying to push through some new wellness initiatives, which everyone immediately recognized as thinly veiled attempts to reintroduce her yoga cult. But the energy in the room was different. There were murmurs, eye rolls, and then, slowly, people started speaking up. One of my neighbors, a sweet old lady named Mrs. Henderson, actually stood up and said, "Karen, dear, if Mr. My Last Name doesn't want to bend himself into a pretzel on a Tuesday morning, I dare say that's his prerogative. And frankly, involving the police over it was, well, it was a bit much, wasn't it?" And that was the tipping point. The floodgates opened.
People were sharing their own Karen stories from the past, complaints about her micromanaging, her insistence on pointless rules, her general overbearing nature. It was like a dam broke. I just sat there trying to keep a straight face, but a grin kept wanting to spread. It wasn't just my battle, it was everyone's. The outcome? Well, let's just say Karen is no longer the head of the Community Wellness and Engagement Committee. In fact, that committee was quietly dissolved and its responsibilities absorbed by a much saner, less dictatorial group. And her proposal for mandatory anything wellness-related shot down faster than a duck in hunting season. The relief was palpable throughout the room. I haven't really spoken to Karen since. She still lives a few houses down, and sometimes I catch her giving me the stink eye when I'm getting my mail. But it's a different stink eye now. It's less, "I will destroy you with HOA power," and more, "I'm mildly annoyed and feel a sense of injustice, but no, I can't do anything about it." Which honestly is fine by me. What did I learn from all this? Mostly that some people just love power, even if it's over something as utterly ridiculous as mandatory neighborhood yoga. And that sometimes you just have to stand your ground, even if it means enduring a visit from the police over the most preposterous non-issue imaginable. It was exhausting, infuriating, and truly bizarre, but ultimately, it was a win. A very, very weird win. And I got a great story out of it, which, let's be real, is half the fun of dealing with a Karen. I just wish I could send a thank you card to those two police officers. They truly deserved a raise for the sheer nonsense they have to put up with.